Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us. Welcome. My name is Andrew Townsend. I am an e-learning evangelist here with eLearning Brothers. Today we're going to be talking about the ROI of templates and customizable courseware. This webinar will be recorded. We're going to send a copy of it out to everyone who is registered, so you don't miss anything that you're interested in. We have with us Chris Willis, our Senior Product Manager over Customizable Courseware with us today. Thanks for joining us, Chris. We're glad to have you with us and excited to hear what you got to teach us. If you guys have questions during the webinar, we'll be ready to answer questions in the questions panel, or I'll try to bring those up to Chris during the webinar so she can get to as many questions as we can possibly get to. But if we can't get to your question, we'll do our best to continue the conversation in the webinar recap, and that'll be a blog that we post on our site next week. Also, at some point, Chris is going to be using the show of hands feature to try to get an idea of where you guys are at. So if you can go ahead and find that show of hands button, it should be right toward the top of your GoToWebinar user interface, and go ahead and raise your hand. Let's see how many people we can get raising their hands here. All right, that's climbing. We're at about 50%. So 50% of you are finding that button, and hopefully when we ask the questions, we'll get a few more of you. So thank you. Also, just so you know, one of the things we like to do after the webinar is try to follow up as soon as possible. Sometimes it's just to get feedback. Most of the time we want to touch base and find out if anyone needs some one-on-one clarification about our webinar topics after the fact. A lot of the time this is done via an email. We will send an email after this webinar that's going to have information, follow-up information on all of these topics, links to some of the things that Chris is going to mention. So be looking for that email. And without further ado, I'll go ahead and turn the time over to you, Chris.
Thank you so much, Andrew. I am so excited to be with these guys, be with you all today and talk about ROI, Return on Investment, a subject near and dear to my heart as a recovering entrepreneur and now a product manager. ROI is part of the daily language we use in business here, and it should be a part, if you're involved in developing e-learning or delivering e-learning in any way, it should be a part of your language as well. And I'm going to help you get a little better at speaking ROI. I know I wasn't a native speaker, and I'm sure many of you are not, so let's dig into this and get right on it. ROI, we're going to cover today ROI, Return on Investment. We're going to talk about the basics of ROI and how it's used in the context of e-learning development. We'll talk a little bit about why ROI matters in business and what decision makers want to see, how they use ROI when making decisions. And we'll break down and tear apart a little, actually kind of a couple different approaches to ROI that you can actually use when you need to make budget requests. So to get started, I always like to know who we are and get a little bit of the background of who's out there so that I can help tailor this a little bit more to your particular needs and prepare to answer your particular questions. So right now I'm going to open this up. Andrew's going to open up the polls.
All right, go ahead and vote. These polls are open now. Preliminary numbers here, Chris. It looks like we've got a lot of instructional designers, trainers, and learning managers with us today. We've got learning developers. Not too many business managers or entrepreneurs. We have a few people that have used the other option. They're saying they're an AVP, Talent Acquisition and Development. Don't forget to let us know in the questions panel if you're clicking that other one. We'll go ahead and keep this open for about 5 more seconds. It looks like just about everybody has voted, though. 3, 2, 1, and here's those results. So we're at about 70% instructional designers and trainers, 14% learning developers, and 10% learning managers.
Awesome, awesome. Fellow IDs, I know that I'm a creative originally as well, and this is numbers are not my bag, but I think you'll find that when we get through this, that you'll be a lot more comfortable with using ROI. And also, hopefully, I'm giving you some tools. If you yourself are using ROI already, I'm giving you some tools and some ways of talking about it to your team to help develop their ROI and business language skills. So we're focusing a little bit today and using examples that are from the eLearning Brothers toolbox. So tell me a little bit more about what it is that you like in our box of tricks here. What's your favorite eLearning Brothers resource? Is it our interactions and game templates, our cutout people? Gosh, I love our cutout people. I have so much fun with them. Customizable Courseware, which of course is near and dear to my heart. Our blogs, our videos, our webinars, your ELB sales consultant, or other. Again, use the question panel. Let us know.
So those responses are coming in. Of our audience, it looks like they're pretty split between the game templates, the cutout people, and the knowledge base via blogs, videos, and webinars. We've got a few people that are fans of the Customizable Courseware.
Awesome!
And the people that are saying other are saying they're clicking other because they like everything. They like all of our options. So I'm going to go ahead and close that poll. Last chance to vote. 3, 2, 1, and here's those results. So yeah, I mean it's a hard draw between the blogs, videos, webinars, the cutout people, and the interaction and game templates, and then a good chunk of people liking the customizable courseware.
Awesome, awesome. And you know, I love our eLearning Brothers groupies who love everything, and thank you so much, because you make my job so much fun. So let's dig into the subject now. Let's get right into ROI. Why does ROI matter to you? Well, when you're looking at something like all of the goodies that we offer here at eLearning Brothers, say that you want you don't right now have a full subscription to everything, and you want all the templates and the stock images and the icons and all the things, or you want to use our new training arcade and get into some of the gamification. Maybe you're looking at customizable courseware and some of these new tools, and you're saying, I want these things. I really like to have these as part of our toolkit here in my company. So when you're looking at them from a developer perspective, you're probably looking at things, or from an ID perspective, we're looking at things like we want to make our learning more engaging, we want it more interactive, we want to do more for less. The devs are looking at it and they're saying, I want these templates because I want to learn some new tricks. I want to be able to make some things that I otherwise either wouldn't have time for, or I don't yet have the skills to do. But if I have these, I can learn how to do more. But when we go to the business and we talk to the business, all these things about engagement and design and inspiration and fun, they matter. But when we're talking about budget allocation, what really matters are doing more, saving money, and saving time, time being money. So when we approach the business and we say, gee, I wish I had an unlimited budget, I wish I could buy all of these things. And it just reminded me when I was putting this presentation together of something my dad used to say to me, which was, well, you can wish in one hand and you can poop in the other one and see which one fills up faster. And when we approach the business with our wishes, that kind of is what we're doing here. So what's the difference when we go to the business and we start speaking their language of ROI? How does that change things from the wishing into more of a conversation that's going to matter to the business? Well, if you go to the business and you say, you go to your CLO and you say, an eLearning Brothers developer package will pay for itself after the first course, and your CLO, being the skeptical business person that that he or she is going to say, well, that sounds way too good to be true. How did you come up with those numbers? And you're going to be able to say, I'll email you my ROI. The projections are actually very conservative. So what is this ROI? What really are we talking about here? Let's break that down. Let's unpack that a little bit and take a look. There is a calculation that is a formula that ROI is the value minus the cost over the cost times 100. You get a percentage. Really, when we're talking about ROI and telling the story of ROI in order to make our business case for something, what really matters is what is the amount of value that will be received to the business after all the costs and expenses, that is, the investment, has been deducted. In simple terms, what your C-suite is looking for is, will they get their money's worth from their expenditure? And that's what ROI is, a hypothesis on the front end. When you're doing it as a projection, it's a hypothesis that they will get the value, or more than the value, exceed the value of the expenditure. After the fact, you can use it as a calculation to see the performance. How did you actually do? Did they get the value? So that you can make wiser decisions moving forward. So before we do move forward, does anybody have any questions about just this basic definition of what is an ROI?
We're not getting any questions right now that are coming in. A lot of people are echoing what you're talking about. They are interested in value. They understand that that value is what those with the purse are interested in.
You know, those of you who are IDs who go to conferences, and we do a lot of the conferences here at eLearning Brothers, and when you're going, there's always a discussion about how do we raise our value as learning professionals in the eyes of the business, and definitely they're looking for the numbers. So the business uses the ROI to select the most budget-worthy expenditures. Like us, the business's budgets are limited. They don't have an unlimited person, and as budgets shrink and when times are difficult, there's a lot of scrutiny and they have to make a decision. And so a lot of times it's not that what you want is any less valuable than what somebody else wants, but in the choice between A and B, which one is going to rise to the top. So what we want to do with ROI is make our case and make it easy for the business to see the value of what questions we're bringing to the table. When business is looking to evaluate competing solution options or vendors, they're going to look at the ROI, and at that point it may not even be they choose the lowest cost. They're going to look for the thing with the highest value and the highest return. And then again, after the fact, what was the ROI? We spent A, we received B. What was the difference? Was it positive or was it a negative? Sometimes it's a negative return. Boy, we don't want to do that again, right?
So Chris, let me step in really quick. So Carly asks, should IDs speak to the business wishes?
That's a good question, and I'm actually going to get to that. That's actually a perfect segue to what we're about to get to here. So Carly, hang with me here a minute, and we'll get right into that. So when we're looking at value, the three main ways that you can break down value is looking at it from the standpoint of productivity, which means in the sense of learning, you're getting more for less, or in this case, more learning for less. You're going to make a better use of your time. You're going to develop more learning and train more learners at either the same or a lower cost. So increasing your productivity. increasing your efficiency. That's speed to outcome, process improvements, ability to develop more learning faster. It also, you can look at it from the standpoint of borrowing from like reducing error and working smarter in learning and developing your learning. So in the example here, we have with Customizable Courseware, I can deploy an 11-module sales curriculum in 30 days instead of 9 months. So speed to outcome. And then effectiveness. And this is the holy grail of ROI for e-learning. And this is the hardest one to get to. Because you've got to really dig into some intangibles and get into really deep into the business side of the business. But say if I introduce the Griffin Hill sales system, I'm going to hypothesize, make a projection that our third quarter sales results will post 30% higher than last year. And that's not something you just do as a whim. We're actually going to do some calculations to show how you would start working towards something like that. So Carly, in answer to your question, which of these value calculations is right for my situation? Value is in the eye of the person who's making the investment, or to answer your question, it's in the eye of the business. What matters to the business most right now? And businesses have trends. They have things that are really important to them, and they kind of rise and fall. Andrew, you getting a question there?
I just have a comment, an interesting comment and point of view from Anthony, who says value is often assessed by the learner's ability to successfully repeat the desired behavior of the learning model. This then affects the organization's bottom line.
That's exactly right. When I said the holy grail is measuring effectiveness or outcomes, that's really what we want to get to. I mean, we're talking here baby steps in ROI, and the examples that I'm going to use are pretty simple and basic to prove the concept. But ultimately, this is what we really want to get to, is our learning making a difference to the bottom line of the business? That is why we as learning professionals in business exist. That's why we have jobs. And that's what we want to move towards. So let's look at that from kind of the examples that I've set up here. We'll kind of scaffold on that. We'll start with the easiest, some of the easier ones, and we'll get into some of those little bit more difficult concepts. Even though I'll be honest, I'm not going to get into a super, super deep ROI from the standpoint of breaking down business things. If that's something that after we finish this presentation that we didn't get to, then by all means send in some feedback and we'll tack into that. We'll go to the next level next time. But so investment considerations, when I'm looking for return on my investment, when I am the investor, the CLO, the business manager, the person who's actually going to budget, who holds the purse strings for your learning, I'm going to look at the cost of labor. We have a tendency sometimes to think that, well, I need to go out and I need to budget these tools and these things that I want to buy, but we treat our internal labor as if we're free. Well, they're paying me anyway, right? Well, we all have a cost attached to us, and like any other resource, our time is a cost that could be spent doing one thing or doing something else. And so we need to be looking at the cost of labor, and that's an important consideration. Time to deployment. Sometimes it's mission critical. If you're rolling out something big in your organization, or you need to make a change, or sales aren't where they should be, you've had a lot of turnover in sales, your sales force isn't where they need to be, the time that it takes to roll out the training matters. Risk avoidance is big. If you're facing some kind of errors or actions, you're having customer service issues, something's happening, possibly ethics. violations or other issues, then certainly attacking that risk, there's a value to that, a very high value. Opportunity cost is something that is often not thought about. Where else could we be spending this money? Where else could we be spending this time? Where else could these resources be deployed where they could provide a greater value to the business than they currently are? And if we spend this much now, can we deploy those resources by creating efficiencies to deploy them somewhere else where we get a greater value from them than we currently are? And then opportunity capture. What else will making this expenditure enable that we currently aren't doing now or we don't have the capability to do now?
One other thought here that I think you may end up speaking to as well later. Here's a comment. Moving at the speed of light, business is leading with ROI. The business folk are thinking in ROI, but we also think in aesthetics. And we as learning professionals and designers, and myself, have seen aesthetics hurting in design. Have you ever given thought to aesthetics versus ROI? What are your thoughts on that? And I think that's going to help lead into where you're headed.
I think so too. And it shouldn't be either or. So please don't hear me as saying, when I say the business is looking at the cost and these other drivers, please don't hear me as saying that they don't care about aesthetics or brand or interactivity. They don't care about them in the moment of making a decision about where to spend money in the way we do. Those are kind of like the kinds of things that I think of as table stakes. Those are things that we bring to the table, right, as learning professionals. But they're so intangible and hard to measure that when we're telling the story and trying to make a compelling case to leadership to spend more money on us, saying to them, well, our stuff will be way more engaging and it's going to be more aesthetically pleasing and therefore it'll have greater value to our learners. The question then becomes, when we're competing between that and some other expense of a software or a tool or even hiring expense, and we're looking at the hard value, the business is going to weigh in higher on the things that it can see will add to the bottom line, which is the #1 reason for business to exist. Without a healthy bottom line, there is no business, no matter how attractive or interactive or effective, frankly, our learning is in meeting its stated objectives. So when we want to show value and we're going to the C-suite, they're busy people. They have a lot on their plate. What we want to try and get to is the simplest, most believable calculation that will support the size of the investment request. So we want to be simple. We want to be credible. So if you're going and you're asking for a couple $1,000s for a couple template subscriptions from somebody who holds a $500,000 budget, obviously your ROI calculation can be what we used to call a paper napkin, back of the paper napkin projection. You can just literally say, look, you know, the average cost of a course is this, we're going to save X%, and this is that, and boom, it's done. But if you're a team of one and that expenditure is a very sizable portion of your learning budget, then you're going to need to go a little bit deeper and show a deeper value and spend a little more time to support your story in your value story. So you want to sell your vision to your stakeholders. And what I did was I actually, for this part, I borrowed from our Griffin Hill sales system Customizable Courseware and some of the selling methodology. Selling is selling, whether you're selling internally to your stakeholders or you're selling out to your customers and your prospects. And a lot of the same methodology and approach applies. So you want to take a look at and to be able to relate to them. What is the current state? What's the status quo? What's happening right now in the business? And from an ROI standpoint, you'll be looking at, well, what is the current cost of either what we're currently doing or what we plan to be doing, the current cost of that, the cost projection for that. How could it be better? You want to paint a picture of the vision of how you can break through barriers, how things will be improved. What does this look like when it's working right? You want to look at the and be able to project the cost of the change. What are we going to have to invest in? What is the investment? And consider some intangibles. Again, the higher the thing you're going for and the more advanced thing you're going for, the more you're going to have to start digging below the surface of the obvious and start putting a dollar value on some of these intangibles. And then the value of the outcome. Again, consider intangibles. They're harder to put a dollar value on, but they're easy to throw in. They're kind of like what I call the icing, you know, on the cake. Once you get that, we're going to save this, and it's going to be so much more, it's going to represent our brand so much better, and it's going to be so much more interactive. It's going to be more widely accepted, so we expect that the completion rates will be higher when we use these things and make this more engaging and aesthetically pleasing. It'll be more relatable when we start using characters that look like us in our scenarios. So those are where you can throw in those extra things that are not only are you going to get your money back, not only are you making a wise choice, but all these other things that matter to me, and they will matter to you too, but they're not necessarily the reason, the number one business reason we're going to make this decision. And then what happens if you do nothing? What happens if we just move on and keep going the way it is? And if you can show that there's a good return and things will improve greatly, but we could stay what we're doing and just keep doing what we're doing, and then this will happen. A lot of times that can be a very compelling argument for making a move, especially if there is something, if you're looking at something from the standpoint of risk avoidance. That's definitely a business value statement right there. What could happen if we do nothing? Because that could have very high cost to the business. So let's look at a simple sort of ROI that's based on very tangible, very tactical approach to ROI here. So we'll look at Elena here. She's a program manager for a large global technology company. She has 5 storyline developers, and they're going to roll out 6 courses over the next year, which is a total of 30 courses. Do you see what I did here? I made a storyline problem. Sorry. Sorry, I couldn't resist. So anyway, to continue our storyline problem. So this is a basic kind of a breakdown of how Elena calculated her production hours and her cost per course. I took this out of my archives of something that we had actually used in a proposal for, it was a client proposal years ago, and this is how this breaks down. Everything here is based on averages. So some courses will be much more highly interactive, some will be less. The budget, the rate here, it's based on a loaded rate, roughly equivalent of, say, a 50K resource with a loaded, with benefits, etc., and other, costs associated. That's roughly, and that would be, again, you would take the average of your developer pool and come up with that, or if you're outsourcing, you would use your outsource rates. I'd say this one's probably kind of conservative, but we'll just leave it there. I like to use conservative numbers when doing ROI, because then when my stakeholders look at it, they'd say, well, wow, this ROI makes sense even using conservative numbers. So even if we miss, what's that? If you shoot for the moon, even if you miss, you land among the stars. Well, even if we miss here, we're going to come close to our ROI. It makes it more believable. So if we have 20 interactions per course and our devs take roughly 8 hours per interaction, that would be 160 hours at our rate, and this is where we get this number. And then our quiz questions, we need to track them. We need to some of them have interactions in the quiz questions themselves. We're giving them 1 hour per, and so if there's 12 of those per course, and etc. We go on. There's 40 static pages, and we have photos, a half hour per photo to handle and find and crop and do things with photos. We gave it 60 hours for the storyboarding. And then I usually use a calculation of roughly 10%. This one's a little low for both QA and project management and the meetings that go to report to stakeholders and SME meetings, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And however you would justify, you can move these numbers around. But for the purpose of this example, that came to 330 hours per at this rate, and a rough cost of $10K $560 per course. And this is what Elena was using for her baseline, her current situation. So she reviewed her budget with her team, and one of her storyline developers sent her a link to the eLearning Brothers Shamrock Storyline Template Library. And Elena went and looked at this, and her developer told her that the templates here are suitable for most, if not all, of their typical interactions, and some of these are even more advanced than some of the interactions that they normally do, and they certainly offer some more creative value. It's going to help them with their score tracking. But at the end of the day, her developer said, I think that I could cut my development time in half on using these templates as opposed to developing everything from scratch. So Elena went back and she said, well, my developer says that they think we can cut things in half. Let's be conservative. Let's say we're going to reduce just the interaction and the quiz time by about 25%. What does that do to our cost? If we reduce just the hours per interaction and the hours per quiz question, that reduces the task hours here from 160 to 100. Here the quizzes from 12 hours to 9. That decreased our budget by this amount, which carries down, which is a net savings of $2K per course. If we save $2K per course times 30 courses, we're going to have over $60,000 in annual savings. If the cost per developer package for each of the 5 devs is roughly, just under $1,100, and you multiply that out, the annual license cost for that package in order to achieve this savings is about $5,500, roughly, rounded. And that's an annual ROI by spending this $5,500 on these 5 licenses we're going to ROI about $55,000 in development costs. Now, there's a lot of wiggle room in there. You could go back and you could recreate this, and even if your numbers were nowhere near as high, even if your rates are lower or whatever, there's a lot of wiggle room in this. But this gives an example of how you can go through and you would walk through the calculation to justify that template purchase. Now, on top of that, we also have the savings in time. So we have a huge resource saving. We're saving 63 hours per course by using templates as opposed to developing from scratch. So we multiply that times 30 courses, and we get back 1,890 hours that a resource is free, that resource can be deployed towards some other opportunity. Are we going to develop another course that was on our nice to have but not on our gotta have list? Can that developer be learning something else, how to do, maybe deployed doing video or doing something else for the organization? There's a lot of other ways that we could use these savings. Maybe they move in, they do, one of your devs, you move them into doing ILT because you don't need them here in eLearning. Whatever it is, you have a resource that's free that you can apply to adding value in some other way while you're saving those dollars. So, of course, if Elena had gone to her Chief Learning Officer, her CLO, and she'd said, hey, can we have $5,500? We've got this really cool dev package. It's going to save so much time, and we're going to be able to make these really cool things with it. Our stuff's going to look so fabulous, and it's going to be so interactive. We're so excited to have it. That would be a pretty weak business case. But going to her boss and being able to say, hey, I think I can save you more, I can spend $5,000 and save us more than $50,000, that certainly justifies the cost of what she wants to do. And that makes it it makes it a no-brainer at that point for the management. And then she didn't glom on, because in the world she already made her case and she didn't need to go further, and she knows that next year she's going to have to justify her budget again. So next year she's going to be able to show how she can use the cutout people to reduce on-site photo shoots and use that to justify her spend for her dev packages for next year. So we're going to jump into customizable courseware here a minute. Do we have any questions before I move on?
Yeah, we have one question that just popped up here. Just for clarification, they say you have to be careful though, because you aren't saving $55,000 in dollars. You're saving $55,000 in opportunity savings. Is that right?
If the plan is to do these 30 courses and the budget is to provide these resources and allocate them, they are allocated to completing these 30 courses, then their time is already budgeted as a real expense for completing, a labor expense for completing those courses. So if we are hypothetically saying they would create 30 and this, then that, then yeah, it's an opportunity cost. But if we really do have a hard dictate and a plan set to create 30 courses, and if those 30 courses really will cost that much labor, and that labor is allocated and projected, then it really is cost saving. It is a cost savings projection against something that the business already plans to do. That's a good question. So yeah, when you're doing ROI, you have to make sure that the thing that you're ROIing against is strategically aligned with what the business is planning to do and business goals. I used to get salespeople come to me when I was running my business all the time and just say, but if you this and then this, think of how much you'll save. And I would say, you know, I'm a team of 25 people. That'd be fabulous if I could do this, but I'm just not going to do it because I'm not going to buy that amazing software or that amazing tool. You can't save me enough to make that expense because either I don't do enough of it already or I just can't afford it anyway. It's not even in my strategy. So that brings up a very, very good point. The thing that you're ROIing against has to be something that the business is already planning on spending that money or it's already allocated to be spent in the budget. Or you're going to make a case for that budget to begin with.
There's a follow-up on that one saying, but the salaries are set costs, so unless you lose a ID, you don't save real dollars unless they're confused. Bottom line, the business doesn't get $55,000 to spend elsewhere. Instead, you get to spend time elsewhere. Is that right?
That's true. That is true. If you're going to keep that labor on the bench, but again, I would argue that if you're going to justify the existence of that labor doing those courses, you know, I see what you're saying from a strictly business standpoint, from telling the story of where we're going to spend the money. If I'm approaching it with leadership and I'm looking at something that we're already planning on doing, I'm going to approach it this way as a savings. If they want to look at it as an opportunity, I guess I'm a little bit more cynical from the standpoint of my years in business and looking at the training department, and this is going to sound really harsh, but we are, as trainers, we're considered a cost, and our salaries are in the cost of the business. And so I'm always looking for ways to justify our cost and to show how we are doing more. So if I can show that we had planned to do this and it was going to cost us this much in the original plan, and that I can alter the plan, and by doing that we can do more, or we can, you know, the reality of it is that the labor will either be offset to do something different, or the labor will be moved to do something else, or
there's a follow-up response from someone else that says even if you do get time to spend elsewhere, that labor can then go on to another task. So as long as you have, I mean, if your plan is to hit that goal of that many courses and then be done and walk out for the rest of the year, then you're not saving anything. But if you have more tasks that you can move on to, it's definitely a quality investment.
Well, you're adding more to you can offer more value elsewhere to the business, and that's where management has to show that. So in some ways, your person who was brought up the original point is 500% spot on from the standpoint of showing value and telling the story. It's our story. We get to tell it any way we want, and we need to be able to just then turn around and justify what we said from the standpoint of value to the business. We do have to be careful when we're talking about time savings, because when we start talking about needing people in the business, we want to make sure as leaders of our people that we do have things for them to do elsewhere that add additional value. So, switching gears, who in the audience, who do we have who is familiar with our customizable courseware? Raise your hand. I know we had a few, because a few of you said it was your favorite thing, but I do also know that customizable courseware is fairly new, And so I always like to see who's is the word getting out there, and do people know?
About 20% of our audience has heard of Customizable Courseware.
So that's about what I expect. That's great. Awesome.
Let me ask a follow-up question really quick. How many of you have heard of Customizable Courseware because you attended a webinar on it and heard Chris talk about it? Okay. Okay, about 10%. So about half of those who have heard about it have been to a Customizable Courseware webinar.
Awesome. Awesome. Thank you. And thank you for coming back. I appreciate you. So just very quickly, our Customizable Courseware, we have, right now we have two main libraries. We have a soft skills library, and we have a, currently in production, our professional sales, Griffin Hill Sales System library. When you buy the Customizable Courseware, it's like templates only carried through to the point where these are actual courses, and you get them in the 3 most popular e-learning tools. You get the classroom guides and slides, fully customizable source code. We give you the source to work with, licensed for 3 years, blended and interactive. And so just very quickly, the professional soft skills library. There's 15 titles, and they cover a wide range of soft skills topics. So if we wanted to ROI and make a case for our organization and say, well, we want to buy these soft skills training courses, and maybe you're looking at this and you're saying, well, really we'd use these, but you know what, we don't, our people don't, we don't have customer facing people, and you know, these are a little soft, maybe I'm not as interested. So you know, it's like, you know, I'd rather have these many, or we're looking at just justifying to business leaders in general the cost of customizable courseware. One of the ways you could do that would be just do a paper napkin. This is one we use. Actually, after doing enough of these, I would move some of these numbers around, but this is pretty conservative. If we were to develop these courses in-house, and we spent, you know, instructional design 40 hours, and then storyboarding 20 hours, and e-learning development 80 hours, and then another 40 doing classroom materials, and move these around any way you like. Raise it up, raise it down, whatever you want to do. Take your base rate of internal cost for developing from scratch, budget it out. You get to about $57.60 per course. You take the 15 courses, and we would say the value of those courses is $86,400, which is more than 3 times the current rack rate of the customizable courseware. So this is just, again, an off the cuff. This is a paper napkin. You could go back, look at which of the titles that you would use. You could benchmark this against other off-the-shelf courses that are available in the market. You can change up these numbers. You can say, we wouldn't use the classroom, but we would use only the e-learning, and my numbers are X, Y, and Z. Put those in. Our internal rates are this, or our custom rates are that. Multiply it out. You could add a cost in underneath, saying that the cost per is this, but we're going to customize each one X%. That will cost additional, so it may not have your end value may be different. You'll have a cost to offset it, but then you'll weigh that against your alternatives. So, you know, there's many different ways you could do this, and this is just kind of, again, giving you an example to give you ideas that you can carry forward and apply to your own situation, because everybody's situation is going to be a little bit different. Everybody's costs are going to be different, and the values and what your goals are to use for soft skills and what you want to accomplish with it is going to be really different in every case. Let's look at the sales system library. And this one I want to touch on a little bit more deeply, that idea of getting into some of those deeper outcome-based ROIs. So quickly, what are some ideas for how you might project ROI for a new sales curriculum? If you wanted to introduce a sales curriculum to your organization, how might you approach projecting the ROI for that?
So we'll wait a second for you guys to write some of your thoughts in the questions panel. While that's happening, I do want to point out, so on December 14th, we have another webinar coming up that's going to be talking with the folks over at Griffin Hill about their sales system library. So if you guys want to come back on December 14th, we don't have it, you can't register for it yet. We'll get that up on tomorrow. Tomorrow's Friday. So be checking for that, and you can learn more about that sales system, because we'll have them in the house with us.
So while you guys are writing your things in, I'll just jump into here some of the ways that there's two different ways that I would justify this in my organization. First off, if you're not currently using e-learning for sales training, this is really easy. Your basic ROI play for e-learning is, especially with salespeople, because time is literally money. Every moment out of office or out of pocket for a salesperson literally equates to lost opportunity in dollars. So reduce time out of office, reduce travel costs. This is usually the big one. If you're currently training based on having people go to a training, go to a training event, and you have a distributed sales team, then the travel costs are huge, and you can usually pretty readily offset the cost of purchasing a curriculum by just ROI and going to e-learning for that. Repeatable results. Sales in some environments is very high turnover, so how do you manage attrition? Well, by e-learning you can get into there. And then getting into tracking, enhanced tracking, correlate training to results, do more managing change. So what you need to do is capture your current state measures and then calculate what the savings would be if you're moving into e-learning, and then weigh that against the cost of the curriculum spend. If you're already doing e-learning, now we're going to get into more deeper outcome-based projections, and we're going to look at things like key performance indicators of how many proposals are we doing per quarter, how many truly qualified prospects do we have in our pipeline at any time, because sales is a number game. So the bigger number of qualified prospects is going to increase the odds. We're going to look at velocity, speed to close, which has a direct impact on cash flow. The sooner we can get to close, the sooner we can get the money in. That immediately raises the health of the business. Obviously, increased sales in general, if you can correlate those directly in some way to the training. Say you do a group, and one group has gone through the training, they're the early adapters, and they put through, and you measure those results against another group that has not yet been through the training, and if you see an increase, that's going to increase your odds. You can at least point to a correlation, if not a causation, and then increase the numbers, again, the odds. We see X number of presentations, X number of demos that we're giving. So what you're going to want to do is work very closely with your sales manager. He or she knows your internal KPIs and how you're currently measuring sales. And then that's going to help you look for being able to apply tangible numbers of, if we see an increase in this, that could result in this kind of a value and lead to either this kind of savings or this kind of opportunity. This is true whether you're talking of sales or any other aspect of the business. If you work with the business and ask them about what are their KPIs, what are they measuring, and can you help me figure out how to tie that to real dollars on the bottom line. A lot of times the people in the business, they have a lot more practice than we do in training and instructional designers in actually doing these kinds of calculations and ROIs, and they can be our ally in helping us get what we want for the organization. So to recap really quickly, we covered ROI, return on investment, the basics for e-learning development, why ROI matters to us in business, and how to use simple ROI projections to state our case. If we have any other questions, but then I'm going to just roll right in because we're coming to the top of the hour, right into our offer here, and I'll let Andrew bring us to the end and pick up any last questions here.
Yep, just watching for some more questions. So feel free, like Chris said, she'll take some questions here at the end. We have no problem going over time. We understand that you do, though. So like I mentioned earlier, watch your email. I'm going to send an email out to all of you that will have some links to Customizable Courseware. We have a free module, so we'll send that link out to you. Chris also talked a lot about our template libraries. I'll send you some information about our template libraries. And we'll see what other handouts we can get for you. That will also include a copy of this webinar. If you want to be able to review this webinar and watch it later, or fast forward, rewind, watch some parts over and over, you're welcome to. In that email, it will be a link to this webinar. So be looking for that. And if you have questions for Chris specifically or me about our webinars, you can send an email to info@elearningbrothers.com. and they'll get those to where they need to go. They'll get those to us. So by all means, contact us, reach out to us, and be watching for that email. Watching some of the comments coming in, there aren't any questions at this time, Chris, but lots and lots of thank you, and looking forward to more. So thanks for joining us, Chris, and thanks everybody for joining us on this webinar. Like I said, we've got one coming up about the Griffin Hill sales system on the 14th of December. You won't want to miss that one. All right. Thanks, everybody. We'll see you next time.
Thanks, y'all. See you next time.